or into the tomb. You can turn it, right? You can. It just adds depth to this as a display piece, where they weren't going to be able to kind of cover everything in plates and have you build up an entire tomb around it, right? I mean, it would just be a lot of gray, pretty boring, just kind of plates on plates on plates. I think this was a really happy medium in a way that, like, with Bag End, you're not sitting there looking like, oh, but where's Bilbo's party going to be? But where's, if we have the party, where's that tree that he gave the speech at and disappeared? You know, where's the barrels of meat? In this case, if you're in Balin's tomb, you're like, well, where's the tomb? Where's the well? Where's the gate? You know, where's all these key pieces so they can really recreate the scene? And I think it's done really, really well here. Hello, bricks, chicks, and minifigures. You are listening to AFOLs Welcome, where we talk about all things Lego from the perspective of two adult collectors. We are your co-host. I'm Grinch.
And I'm West.
And today we are diving into the world of Middle Earth and discussing the Lord of the Rings. But before we get over to that, West, how was your week? What
Grinch,
did you do?
I am in full pack mode this week. I have most of my Legos completely packed up. So I did not build anything because that would be counterproductive. I am now down to my final set to pack up, which is the El Dorado Fortress sitting next to me. It's going to be a lot to pack up, but I think actually the modular aspect of the set itself is going to be a nice feature in terms of packing it up, because each kind of subsection, I think, will hopefully pack up really nicely. To help me with that, I actually took some 3x8 sheets of plywood and cut them into little dividers for, I have these Sterilite 62-liter plastic clear totes, and I took the 3x8 plywood and cut it into dividers. And I'm not going to maneuver my laptop to show the viewers, but I will tease an image on Instagram later next week or this week for the listeners to see just kind of what I did. Pretty straightforward. Did require a little bit of measurement on my end, but it's ended up being a really nice kind of divider for the box, which anyone who has moved Legos, and we've talked about this in previous episodes, one of the importance that we want to avoid, right, is not only a lot of weight kind of falling on your sets, but also kind of avoiding the plastic on plastic rubbing that can either mark up clear pieces or mark up, you know, certain other elements or bend stuff, right? So these little quadrants kind of keep the sets from from me loading up too many sets on top of each other and ultimately kind of weighing down all of the sets. So it's a very simple but I think elegant solution for that problem, and I will post the information on that online.
Cool.
So that is what I built this week. Wooden dividers.
Well, I did not build anything because I've just been taking a little Lego break as we gear up towards Brick World. So we will, well, Grinch will be at Brick World Chicago. I will be there all day Sunday. And if you catch me Friday, I will be there Friday morning and maybe afternoon. And then I might stop by a little bit on Saturday, but I will definitely be there all day Sunday. So yeah, if you're coming to Brick World, come say hello.
And Grinch, I want to do two things: is apologize for the listeners or viewers who saw our episode with Nab Bricks in January, where I said if I lose, I will come to Brick World, and I am unable to make that work with my moving schedule. We're moving that following week, and so this will be our final kind of full weekend in our house as the movers are starting our pack up. So I unfortunately just could not make that work with our schedule. So Grinch will be there. He is more than capable of representing AFOLs Welcome. And for anyone who sees him out walking around, if you can get a picture of him in his shirt, post that online, I know we'd appreciate it. So
Why don't we head over to some exciting Lego news?
let's do it.
Exciting Lego news. West, why don't you give us the rundown for this week's news?
Well, Grinch, we got some really exciting news this week. One Piece sets were finally officially announced, and we have official images for what that looks like. The Bricklink Designer Program Series 5 starts live on June 10th of this week. Lego has launched the She Built That campaign and is launching the She Built That campaign. We got first images of our Toothless How to Train Your Dragon set and images of some summer Disney waves to include the Cruella de Vil car. So, Grinch, what stood out for you?
Well, the One Piece is obviously based off of Netflix, which I believe is on season 2. But there's also, what almost almost 40 years or 30 years of 35 years of One Piece
An
anime out
extensive
there.
back
So
catalog.
there's a lot of of stuff that they could obviously cover. Um, I guess it was 1997. I'm not quite sure when it originally came out, but I mean it's like 30 years. So obviously this is based off the TV show, so it'll be interesting to see if it's enough for One Piece fans. It's certainly this is the latest edition of Lego trying to do an anime. And I'm trying to think, was the last time Avatar the Last Airbender?
I think so. I mean, unless you include something like Ninjago as like a
No, I'm
adjacent.
talking purely like based off of
I
because
mean,
there's like also Exo Force, but it has to be
I don't know if I'd even call Avatar anime then.
sure.
If
So
if
this would be the first anime.
yeah, unless maybe Monkey Kid counts as,
I wouldn't count it.
because Monkey Kid itself, if I recall correctly, was not necessarily an exclusive Lego property as a story.
The Lego one is, yeah.
No, that is, but the concept of Monkey Kid thematically, I believe, goes beyond Lego and was a thing prior to Lego. But we can look that up. That'll be for future discussions.
So yeah, I'm just really curious to see how it sells because I know there's been a lot of people really kind of pandering or rooting or wanting some sort of Lego anime.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting to see how this sells, especially because it's based off of the Netflix series versus the graphic novels themselves.
It's interesting because if you were to ask which anime would be the first one to get the Lego treatment, I don't know if One Piece is the thing that would come to mind. But at the same time, too, I think they're largely complementary towards each other, with the ability in Lego to kind of play into that whimsical style and the color palettes that we see in anime works. So I think that's really cool to see, and it'll be really fun to see if how well this does. From what I've seen, the sets look interesting. I don't know enough about One Piece to sit and point and pick anything out specifically, but from what I have seen, the ship build looks really cool. There seems to be some sort of like seaside arcade, that surf shack. That's what I'm going to call it. Build looks really fun. There's a really cool thatched roof kind of design for it that just kind of screamed like a tropical sort of build and setup. So I could see people integrating that into like a beach on a city beachfront in their cities or something like that. So I think that would be kind of fun. But yeah, it'll be exciting to see how this goes.
So I'd have to say the How to Train Your Dragon, Toothless Dragon, I've seen some interesting dialogue about this online. Um, People I think either love it or hate it, or I mean, it just I don't know. There's a lot of rationalizing going on. I feel like it's either like you're rationalizing why you love it, or you're rationalizing why you hate it, and like there's a lot of explaining. I don't really just see anybody be like, I love it. It's always like, I love it because it's cute and not everything has to be like super adult focused. But then the comments are, but it's an 18 plus set.
Yeah.
So I don't like it personally. I'll ask for your opinion here in just a moment. But for me, I was really looking forward to more of a buildable toothless in the style of the like puppies from 101 Dalmatian or the Simba or something like that, or maybe a smaller one. There's a couple mocks out there that are really really good that use a very similar number of pieces. This one though kind of looks weird, and again, it kind of is a weird question of like, why is this an 18 plus set if if it's this very comical, cutesy, like chibi type design.
Yeah. So that's a great point. I think it looks like the dragon itself is like a baby dragon. And I
Yeah.
think it's almost like it's an adolescent dragon. And a good example that came to my mind as you were describing it is like, remember in Pokemon how they introduced the whole line of like baby Pokemon, and they were just kind of like the chintzier versions and cuter versions of the kind of more senior Pokemon. And this feels like a baby version of Toothless. And it doesn't even look like it's small physically. It looks like it's got kind of chubbier features around like the arms and
Mm-hmm.
stuff. And it looks like it's a baby dragon, which is fine, except that's not really the story
The
of
head is
Toothless.
oversized.
Yeah, and it
It.
just it looks a little more cartoony than I think
Mm-hmm.
we were expecting, and it's not even in the style of the show, and so it does feel a little like out of left field because in the show we didn't.
And it's based off the live action movie though too. So
Right.
it's not even supposed to be cartoony at that point.
And we know that unless there's a significant deviation from the source material, that you know,
Which from the trailer it looks like shot for shot remake.
yes, what's his face, the Viking kiddo, and Toothless are kind
Hiccup.
of
His name,
Hiccup.
dude. When was the last time you watched How to Train Your Dragon?
It's been a long time, but
You need to like seriously go back
oh,
and watch it
I'm
because
an OG
it
fanboy.
slaps, dude.
Oh,
I
I
own
know.
it. I own it. Watched it. I own it.
I own it.
But no, I haven't watched it.
No, I watched those when they first came out and loved them, even as a young adult. Just really recognized the really great job they did in visualizing the bond between a human and I wouldn't even say a pet, right? But like that animal human
A
bond.
companion.
Yeah, a companion animal. That's a great point. So, anyways, wonderful movies. Um, Execution on this Toothless, a little suspect. Seems a little too cutesy for kind of the intent there.
It makes me feel like this is like, they've been coming out with like the kid version and the adult version of sets,
Yeah.
like for the Simba and then the Dalmatian puppies. Like
Mm-hmm.
I feel like this is like the kid version, and that means there's gonna be like a $400 toothless. But I don't want that. but but I don't want that. So pass for me.
Can
This
I
is a
just say,
pass.
why is this not in a playset
I don't know.
with
It's
minifigures?
just it's just kind of weird to me
But
for all the reasons we talked about.
yeah, I mean, it looks
So
cute, but I know enough about the movies to know that this isn't really a
yeah,
thing.
but his head is too round. Like
Um,
it's just. I'm excited for the movie though.
I'm
That
not.
might be
I
like,
just these live action remakes that are just full of CGI. I'm like, what are we
yeah,
doing, guys? This
I
isn't
feel
live
that.
action. This is still just CGI.
If it's not good, we'll just move on in my life. If it is good, then you have two ways to enjoy one of the best animated movies there is.
It really was a like wonderful series for DreamWorks, a studio that has kind of been more hit and miss than Pixar. They really nailed that one. That was really impressive.
We're gonna have to come out with a movie podcast just for John FC, I think, because he probably wants our takes on some of these things.
Yeah.
But let's bring it back to Lego. Speaking of 101 Dalmatians, we did have the Cruella de Vil car. Interesting. I think that the surprise here for me was that there was more 101 Dalmatians, because I don't think are they doing a remake of it?
I don't think so.
So, the other thing that I thought you would think is interesting with this one is that Cruella de Vil is what?
A minifigure.
It's like we're brothers.
It is fun. The car's way too big, which I know is sort of on purpose, but these cars are very large anyways for what is effectively like a 2 or 4 seater car, depending on the size. And I think this one is at like a 10 wide scale with the hubcaps over the wheels.
It uses the balloon, the hot air balloon piece,
and
there.
It looks fantastic, but for a minifigure, it's like, oof.
Yeah, but Lego and oversized cars go together like soy sauce and rice. I mean, it's just classic.
Yeah, I guess so.
I had Chinese food for dinner, so sorry.
Oh, nice. We made a Hawaiian chicken for dinner, so I also had some soy chicken for dinner. So
yeah, we made like this hot pepper chicken, so it was pretty good.
But that is not why we're here, Grinch. That is not.
This has been Cooking Dinner with West and
AFOLs
Grinch.
Welcome.
AFOLs Welcome to eat.
I will end the news segment with this. I think there's going to be some really exciting news coming up for Star Wars fans. That's all I'll say.
Okie dokie. Yeah, I actually saw a rumor for a gift with purchase I'm excited about, but that's a story for another day. Today's topic. All right. Today's topic, we are talking all about Lord of the Rings. West, this is a theme that is near and dear to my heart. It is my favorite franchise. I've got all the books right over there on my bookshelf in my office, like not the library, like my office, because they're like that special. And this is the theme that kind of brought me out of my dark ages. So why don't you give an overview?
Well, I will give an overview. I will also say, Grinch, that this is one of my favorite themes in Lego as well. I own 2 sets that you sold me, gave to me, got for me.
I bought them at a antique store because they were randomly there and they were on a fantastic deal. And I said, hey, do you want me to buy these for you?
You did, and they were bangers of sets. It was the Mines of Moria and the original Shire set, which I really appreciate.
Which actually, we're not talking about the Shire set today because that is a Hobbit Unexpected Journey set, and we're going to keep the conversation focused on Lord of the Rings. Otherwise, we would literally be here for 5 hours.
Yes. But point is, I love this theme, Grinch. I think I'm going to open this episode with, I think this is the best IP theme Lego has ever made. And I think the minifigures...
West.
Nope.
100%.
And I think the minifigures in this theme are some of the best minifigures Lego has ever made. And I would challenge the listeners and viewers to... This isn't a case of prove me wrong necessarily. I suppose it is, right? I'm willing to be proved wrong.
You can't prove something factual wrong.
I'm willing to be proved, to be convinced otherwise, but I just don't think there's a better series out there that Lego's ever done. And I hands down. But let's get into the overview. So Lord of the Rings is a licensed theme that was introduced by the Lego Group in May of 2012. It's based on the movies directed by Peter Jackson, which are in turn based on the books written by J.R.R. Tolkien.
Tolkien.
Yep. Some kind of interesting facts about the series, both the books and the movies. Over 150 million copies of Lord of the Rings have been sold worldwide. The movies were nominated for over 800 awards. They've won 475 awards, to include 30 Academy Award nominations, with 17 wins. Return of the King won 11 Academy Awards, which at the time was tied with movies like Titanic for the most Academy Awards given to a single movie. And it was the first fantasy film to win Best Picture at the Academy Awards. So not only is this series near and dear to your heart, it's near and dear to my heart. We have a lot of friends who really enjoy this series, but it's also a series that has just gone all over the world and is like, just has made a huge cultural impact on the world itself. I was literally listening to Lord of the Rings music today at work as I was typing out a paper. So that was very, very fun. I like to do that.
Okay, demonetize. Just kidding. We're not even monetized.
The theme's first wave was released in the May of that year, consists of 7 sets based on the trilogy of films: The Fellowship of the Ring, The Two Towers, and The Return of the King. Between the first and the second waves of sets, the LEGO Group also released the Lord of the Rings video game, which came out in November of 2012. And then following that, in the summer of 2013, we got 5 additional sets rounding out the complete Lord of the Rings series. Since then, we really didn't get much from Lord of the Rings. We got a few sets for the Hobbit movies. I would say even quite a few, right? That was a pretty robust wave, especially by today's standards.
That was at the same time. That was actually why we got the Lord of the Rings sets in the first place, was because the Hobbit movies came out, and they came out with the wave at the same time.
Yes, and thank you for that correction, Grinch. Once those all completed, though, everything kind of stopped. Mm-hmm. And we didn't see another Lord of the Rings set from LEGO until the spring of 2023, when we got the Rivendell set and the associated Brickhead series.
Years later.
Yes, in the SpongeBob voice.
10 years later.
So, anyways, it took that much time. It took a decade for us to get new Lord of the Rings sets. Since then, it's been a slow trickle of sets, largely staying in the Icons line. We've gotten some Icons, Brickheads, and then we've continued on receiving not only our 3rd Icon set this year, but also kind of a new diversion into the Book Nook series. So far, up to this point, only the Lord of the Rings trilogy has been revisited. We have not seen any revisits of the Hobbit trilogy.
Yeah, and
Grinch, how'd I do?
You did phenomenal.
Oh, thank you.
You did good. We also got a lot of interesting pieces that have been, reused. We got some Ringwraith capes that had holes in them, but I think the most notable piece, outside of all the specialized kind of helmet molds, the specialized swords that we saw, were 2 notable pieces: the horse with the movable back legs. Mm-hmm. It's easy to forget that modern version of the horse actually came out in Lord of the Rings. And then we also got the ring piece.
Yep. Which
has been used, in a few other occasions.
Still one of the only chrome pieces that's still in production.
Yeah. Yeah, we just don't get a lot of chrome pieces at all. And I do feel like this was at a time, we'll talk about the sets here in a moment, but this was also at a time when like brittle brown was at its worst, because I swear anytime I move, like it's these sets that get brown pieces just broken. Just like 2012, I think, was like the peak of brittle brown, 2012 and 2013. So yeah, of those pieces, those are the most notable, I think, that we saw kind of throughout. But like I said, like you said, some of the best minifigures of all time, that means they had to have some really detailed pieces like the Rohirrim helmets, the Gimli helmet, right? We got elf ear molds. We got, different orcs, right? So, one of the last kind of customized big type figs that we saw would be the cave troll, and then subsequently the goblin king as well. We don't get a ton of big figs anymore, so I think that's definitely notable. And then one thing I didn't hear you mention the overview, so you get a 9.9 out of 10 because you missed this one thing, was you talked about the Lego video game, but this was actually the first Lego video game where they introduced audio from the movie itself.
Oh.
So the cutscenes, typically the minifigures would speak this sort of like gibberishanese language where they'd it's funny because my wife and I always play we play a lot of the Lego games together, and I think it's the Harry Potter one. Anytime they'd wave at each other, they go Manu. So like every once in a while, I'll see her in the house or something like Manu. but that was kind of the language that they wouldn't talk. They would be like, oh, whoa, Manu, woo. That was the
Almost
noise
like
they
the
made in the
Sims,
cutscenes.
a little bit.
Right. But in this case, this was the first time where they actually overlaid it with audio from the movie itself.
Yeah.
So it wasn't perfect. Now they've done it ever since, right? With Lego Star Wars, I believe, like Jurassic World. I mean, a lot of them ever since 2012 and forward, Avengers, Batman, etc. They overlaid it with the audio, and in this one, it doesn't quite feel right at times. It certainly just feels a little weird, a little off, but like still one of my favorite Lego video games of all time because it just explores that world. I love the world of Middle Earth, and okay.
And I want to say too that video game was fantastic, and they introduced kind of a new mechanism for it, which was kind of this map, right? The old Star Wars games, you went to like the planet.
Mm-hmm. It was kind of an open world.
Mm-hmm. And it was really interesting. There was like a path to follow, and you couldn't like start at the end, right? But like you kind of worked through this path, and it sort of in its own way had its own little features. And I at the time, for someone who'd played a few of the Lego video games, all of which I enjoyed, I was like, oh, this is a very different approach. And I hadn't quite played them since. In fact, I think
so that was kind of a transition period where so it was a map, but it was a little bit of a linear open world where it's like if you wanted to go do the the Fellowship level where you're in the Shire, escape, like you're in the Shire, you have to go to the Shire part of the map to go do that. Whereas like I think one of my favorites, I think I've played quite a few more of the Lego games than you have, but one of my favorite ones was Marvel Superheroes, where it is just downtown New York City. It's Manhattan.
Nice.
It's a giant open world.
Well, that's cool.
And you can quick travel to places and whatnot, but you can start on the helicarrier and you can just jump off and just dive down to Manhattan. And then when you're down there, you can just go save this person over here for a red brick. You can go, do a little side quest over here. You can go over here to start a new mission, sort of thing.
I didn't know that they did that.
Yeah, so that's cool. The modern take on it. And even the most recent Lego Skywalker Saga game that they came out with, which was probably is actually the last one too. It's more of an open world. I mean, it's even more so of an open world than that. It almost, you kind of like, you go to Coruscant and then you can just run around Coruscant and kind of engage with that area and maybe go on a mission there or two, or side quest. So this was kind of the first or one of the first kind of forays into that sort of world building, where it wasn't just like the cantina where it's like, hey, you're here, here's the area, you can go check out your mini builds. Like that area still kind of exists a little bit, but that's just a part of the map. In this case, when you were, it almost felt like Big Little World, where it's like you're running through like smaller versions of the world, and you can like you can just see the Shire start to turn into Withertop in the distance, and then it turns into Rivendell all of a sudden, which is obviously not realistic, but just a little bit of a different way to kind of
Yeah.
traverse through the world.
Yeah, it was as you meant, transitionary is like a really great description for that, right? Like that game transitioned and kind of modernized those Lego video games into kind of that era of games and prepared them for that open world format
Mm-hmm.
that we have seen later on. So that was very exciting to see.
So let's talk. Let's talk.
Let's talk.
Let's talk
Grinch, what do you want
about
to talk about?
the sets.
Oh, okay.
And yeah, let's talk about Lego.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, welcome to Let's Talk About Lego. Patent pending. Nobody can steal that. So I think we're probably on the same page with this, West, but I think we'll talk more about the 2012 and 2013 sets because we talked, on the show, we've talked so much about Barad-dûr when it came out, the Shire just recently.
Mm-hmm.
We've shared our opinion on Rivendell. We'll still mention them and kind of get into that conversation, but I want to focus, on the big picture here. And so let's talk about these original sets first, because I think that's where a lot of the meat and potatoes of this conversation is going to lie. So pretty interesting that it's a fairly even split between Fellowship, Two Towers, and Return of the King, although there's, in my opinion, a really big gap without any sort of like Gondor representation, like at all. I think the closest thing you get is the Battle of the Black Gate or the pirate ship ambush, but like there's no Osgiliath, there is no Pelennor Field, there's no Elefant, there is no Minas Tirith, and like, come on. But what we do have here is really, really good. I think if we had that, like, it'd be undeniable that this is the best Lego theme ever. But let's talk about what we do have. So there's 6 kind of good guy sets and there's 6 kind of bad guy sets. Where do you want to start?
Grinch, let's just start at the beginning.
All right. Well, Frodo is reading a book. Oh, sorry. At the beginning. In the land of Mordor, where shadows lie. No. Okay. So yeah, let's talk about these in no particular order. So there's it reminds me of a simpler time of Lego too, and I feel like I say that a lot when we do these like older theme reviews, but there's a lot of small sets here, right? Like there's the Gandalf Arrive sets, and it's just a horse-drawn carriage, Gandalf and Frodo.
Mm-hmm.
There's the Shelob attack set, which is like this $20, I think it's maybe $30, but a smaller buildable spider set. You got the Uruk-hai army, which is really an extension of Helm's Deep.
Yeah.
But it's kind of a battle pack, right? Like, and it was a great little set.
Everything in this series is done at like a play scale. And it's done in a way, even the larger sets, right, where it's really meant for play, but also just incredibly detailed. Yeah,
and then there's Withertop and Mines of Moria, right? There's the Orc Forge, a really, really kind of small Council of Elrond / Rivendell, where it's just 2 chairs around a ring on a little pedestal, and the very, very sort of suggestion of Rivendell through this kind of stonework awning that they have. The new one, obviously the new Rivendell definitely this pales in comparison to it, but for what it is, it was very simple, right? And it's just a nice $20 set that tells the whole story, exactly what it is. And yeah, so let's start the conversation by going through some data real quick to kind of get our juices going here with it. So the most expensive set of these original was the Tower of Orthanc. That is also the most expensive set now, used. It's almost crossed that $1,000 threshold, brand new in box. So that's what insane. I find interesting is if you're a Lego investor type, every single one of these sets has doubled, if not tripled, in the with the exception of two sets, has tripled their value since retiring. So that's pretty insane. From a price to part ratio perspective, these things average out to a average of just under 12, 11.9. So like not necessarily good price to part ratios, but I
Not
think
awful.
nobody complained about it because of the detail in the minifigures that you got, and the, just the play scale, right?
Yeah.
So often, especially at this time, like you mentioned, we would see a vehicle, right? Star Wars is very vehicle focused. I think this is one of the themes that was very play scale set piece focused.
Yeah. And a lot of these set pieces, I'm looking at like the Weathertop set, for example, aren't themselves overly detailed, but just the way that with like Lego bricks, they're able to convey the idea of this like worn out tower, this weathered old observation tower that's up on the top of this hill. It really fits not only what we saw in the movie, but in a way that, I think Lego can be very famous for, just leaves the person playing with enough there to fill in the details with their imagination themselves, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's definitely, it gives the suggestion of more in a really meaningful way. I love they have those little statuettes, which are the figures that they used for the games, which are kind of put into Weathertop to look like statues, those stone statues that like
Mm-hmm.
Frodo got thrown against as he gets stabbed, right, by the Witch King. And it's a really wonderful set. Uses some older color palette, so certainly by today's standard, maybe a lot of these 2012 sets come across as maybe a little more blocky than what we would expect. We'd probably expect to see a little more detail and a more muted color palette, but still, I think just a really fun kind of design and a great set.
What is your favorite set of these originals? And you can't say all of them.
Oh dear, Grinch, that's a tough question. I don't know. To be honest, I don't know if I would necessarily have a favorite. I've personally only been able to really enjoy these sets from afar. Usually when I'm at your house and see them on display, and I just get to pour over them and look at them a little bit more. I think some of the sets that really stand out to me in terms of just detail and design are the Battle of Helm's Deep. I think is a
Mm-hmm.
fantastic set. Right, it looks wonderful on display because we always see Helm's Deep effectively a miniature that they built for the movie. From in the movie itself, seeing it in Lego form like this doesn't feel super jarring that the scale isn't quite right to the minifigures. It still feels like something you could very much play with. I think from that perspective, Helm's Deep really stands out to me as just kind of like the definitive set from this series. But
Interesting.
I mean, I have great memories of the Mines of Moria from the movie, just really loving that section of the movie of the
Yeah.
Fellowship of the Ring. So, like, that one really speaks to me. And then I think maybe one of the last ones that I think really stands out would be the Battle at the Black Gate, of just the inclusion of just the amazing minifigures in that series. Some of the, I think the best minifigures
Mm-hmm.
in this series that has the best minifigures in Lego are in that Battle of the Black Gate.
Yeah, and it maybe that take changes in a year or so because we did just get a Mouth of Sauron and Barad-dûr, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But that Aragorn figure, like one of my favorite minifigures of all time. But I wanted to backtrack and talk a little bit about Mines of Moria
Yeah.
because I gave the Shire or Hobbiton Bag End. I gave Bag End some criticism of they added all these kind of smaller side builds to inflate the amount of stuff that you get so that you feel like you're getting more for the money because it's overpriced. Mines of Moria is the exact opposite, in my opinion. Every piece that is done, they is done with intent, right? And if you're unfamiliar with the set, they've got really four key sections of it. They've got the kind of gate of is Balin's tomb, right?
Mhm.
They've got that gate where they shove the axes in, and Boromir looks through the door and he's like, "Oh, they've got a cave troll." They've got kind of a wall section. We got some random buried treasure in there too, but they got the wall section with some pillars that can knock over. And then they've got two other sections. They've got Balin's tomb itself, and then they have a well, where Pippin drops the bucket through and alerts the goblins that they're there. Every one of those pieces is so important and pivotal to the scene that you recreate here, right? And each one of those pieces is done in a really good way. And the one thing that I really like about it is that you can kind of set this up however you want on
Mhm.
display. You can have that wall section, is typically perpendicular to the gate, right? Which is how they suggest it
Mhm.
on the
Mhm.
box. But you can have that wall section facing you, or facing, you can be having it facing perpendicular to you as the viewer, and you can have the gate section kind of opened up so that you can see into the mines, right? Or into the tomb. You can turn it, right? It just adds depth to this as a display piece, where they weren't going to be able to kind of cover everything in plates and have you build up an entire tomb around it, right? I mean, it would just
Mhm.
be a lot of gray, pretty boring, just kind of plates on plates on plates. I think this was a really happy medium in a way that, like, with Bag End, you're not sitting there looking like, oh, but where's Bilbo's party going to be? But where's, if we have the party, where's that tree that he gave the speech at and disappeared? Where's the barrels of meat? In this case, if you're in Balin's tomb, you're like, well, where's the tomb? Where's the well? Where's the gate? Where's all these key pieces so that you can really recreate the scene? And I think it's done really, really well here.
Yeah. And yes, absolutely. I think it is done really well, and it just looks great. The pieces themselves, again, going back to kind of my, if you would call it a criticism of Weathertop, is that it's nothing stands out as particularly exciting from a build perspective. There's
Mm-hmm.
no like really amazing building techniques done here. They have some of the first introductions, I think, of using like a tile and a headlight brick to kind of give you a half offset, just to kind of really kind of emphasize the rock piece. But there are still a lot of stickers in this set used to kind of give the feeling of rocks, to show the script of the dwarven script on the door itself, for example.
Mm-hmm.
But again, it does what it needs to do. And even today you see it and you're like, yeah, that's the tomb, Balin's tomb. And it just clicks, right? In a way that, like, again, I think Lego really shines in this play scale when they're able to do that. And so I think this looks really great. It's super easy to move around and to play with and manipulate. But at the same time, for someone like you or me, someone who's like a huge fan of the series, it, I think, does exactly what it needs to do. And I mean, how else, unless you built the structure around it, how else could you depict this other than
Yeah, I
maybe
mean,
including a little more detail, right?
there
Like,
was somebody that did it at a Lego convention, and it looked good. Don't get me wrong, but it was kind of like, you just kind of put this Lego set on a bunch of base plates, didn't you? And you just made the Lego set bigger because, like, it was that well done. All it's really missing is that base plate part, right? But
yeah,
it's not super compelling. It would just, drag the price up, right?
yeah. I mean, yeah, you could put a bunch of like ugly rock pieces around it and build like effectively like a cave around the entire structure. But at that point, you're not adding to it.
Mm-hmm.
So
So, one of my least favorite sets,
yeah.
the Wizard Battle. There's a part of it I really, really like, and that is, you do get the Palantir build that they did
Hmm.
is that old school kind of 2x2 dome piece that could fit over a minifigure head, but had anti-studs on the bottom because it was, a modified whatever, so circular brick. I don't know. But the piece inside of it is a giant eye, fiery eye, minifigure head. And I think some days I lean the other way, but I think right now I feel like I like it better than the Palantir that came in the new Barad-dûr. Because it's just very simple. It's just the eye, it's representing that specific scene, right?
Yeah.
Of the eye and the Palantir. I don't really like that, fish globe piece over it, right? I would have much preferred. I don't think they needed that. I think they could have just done the minifigure head like they kind of did in the newer one. But I think that's the only thing I like about this one.
Yeah, this one has it's a really simple throne room kind of for Saruman, and the build itself. Again, right? Not to like overly critique the build style of this, but if you just see images of it, to what we could do today using more modern pieces, I think would be a lot more interesting than what they were able to put together at the time. And everything just feels relatively basic. And I don't mean that as an insult. Again, just looking back at this chair itself, it's just not a super detailed build, right? But it captures the obsidian kind of columns and structure of the Tower of Orthanc in a really interesting way. It looks like it has a feature to kind of push Saruman out of his chair, to sort of initiate the fight.
Feature, which is kind of unfortunate because it's kind of ugly. There's just like
that tan
stud sitting in the middle. I'm like, yo, Sauron, what are you, Sauron? What's going on, man? Like,
the other thing
your
too,
chairs like that.
That piece that you mentioned, it does, I think, have a really great look for the Palantir.
Oh, and better. I do want to just quickly mention before you go down that is reused in Barad-dûr, that same piece. I stand corrected. I thought it wasn't, but they did, which is actually kind of a nice callback. But I think officially I like this Palantir better.
Yeah, I was going to say that I think a better piece for that might have been the piece that they created for the Spider-Man, the helmet for Spider-Man Far From Home, the helmet that went over Mysterio, right? That had the same sort of feature, it just didn't have the base that this one has. This one has the circular 2x2 base, and the globe sits on top of that.
But for 2012, I don't think they had the.
They definitely did
2x2 circular jumper piece. You know what I mean? Like, because you would need that on the bottom and then Mysterio's helmet.
Right. Yeah, you the only way you could do that if you could put a stud in between a square, kind of in the center of it. But you're right; they didn't have that 2x2 singular jumper in that capacity, and so it would kind of be an awkward position there at the end of the day. But I think it just they reused them again in yellow. I think in one of the only, I'd be curious to look up the Bricklink's history for that piece in yellow, but I would imagine one of the only inclusions in Lego in yellow of that clear piece. And then we got a really nice Gandalf and a really nice Saruman. Saruman's got this great staff. He uses that Baraki eye piece as the crystal for his staff, which, if you recall, is like a lot more ornamental than kind of Gandalf's staff. And his staff in this series, in this original Go, is not great, right? It's just the 6 long bar piece with kind of a 1 bar section on one end. Which is
kind of what they use in the modern one too. They've never.
It's really fine, right? Like, I don't know what else you could really do, but it's okay. But yeah, this one is a very basic set, right? And when we talked about sort of the great thing about these playscale sets, this is kind of the limitation of these playscale sets, which is you ultimately run the risk of doing just a little too not enough, right? And I would also kind of say that the Council of Elrond set kind of fits a similar bill as well, right?
I just like that set because my brother got it for me for Christmas one year. But if you can't see through that, then whatever.
Well, sounds like a great guy. Um,
Wes got me that set for Christmas, y'all. So
yeah, should have grabbed a copy of it for myself too, because man, this little set is so expensive these days. I was very proud to find that though. That was really cool. Anyways, it's a great little set, but again, you take this and then you look at like what they did for the modern Rivendell, and obviously side by side, nothing close to like, not anywhere close as comparable. But if you could take the modern Rivendell and distill that down into a similar size set, I think you could pretty, clearly articulate that modern one, just the way that they did the roof, the way that they focused on the building, like it looks good. It's just
the tree
became way better, right?
So maybe you've inspired me. Maybe we need to go recreate this set.
I mean, that would be fun
in the mod, but here's the challenge.
Keep the piece count pretty similar.
No, just this octagonal base.
Mm-hmm.
It's that and the little stairs, and like the base of this all has to be the same size.
No, I think that would be a fun challenge.
And you can you can do whatever you want otherwise.
Yeah.
But like if you remove the awning, if you remove the chairs, the pedestal, and the tree, that's your base to build this on.
Yeah. Keep the same number of minifigures and keep the same. So you're kind of only building for the 3 or 4 of them.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah. No,
and this one too, while we're talking about it, it feels like a random inclusion to have Gimli in here.
Mm-hmm.
But for the listeners that don't know, there's a play feature on the back where you kind of just slid this piece forward and it would shoot Gimli off because you would recreate the scene where he hits it with the axe.
Right.
The ring.
And this was back in the day too, right? When they were trying to separate out the characters enough so that like you had kind of reasons to collect multiple sets, right? So
that was the gimmick here. There wasn't like an Infinity Stone gimmick. The gimmick was if you wanted all of the characters, if you wanted the complete fellowship, you really had to get everything.
Mm-hmm.
Which, with the exception of a couple of the 2013 sets.
Price-wise, wasn't a lot. You weren't breaking the bank to pick up these sets necessarily. Now, later on, they got bigger, right? But the original price tags for these were not crazy.
Dude, you could buy all of these sets, or you could buy Rivendell and Barad-dûr.
Both of them, or one or the other?
No, both of them. And if you did, you'd have money left over if you bought all of these sets.
Yeah.
Rivendell and Barad-dûr are $1,000 together. They're both 500-ish. Mm-hmm. I mean, $950 USD. All of these sets are $790.
Yeah. I mean, it's a decent amount of money, right? I'm not trying to say otherwise.
It's a lot of money.
But I mean, the Blackgate was $100. Helm's Deep, I think, was the most expensive, or was that the Tower of Orthanc?
No, Tower of Orthanc was, dude, Helm's Deep was $130.
Yeah. That is not,
that does not feel right.
Yeah.
Dude, Helm's Deep would be $350 at least.
It's a lot of set.
Half of it would just be like rock work.
No.
No, it would. I mean, it would honestly be very similar size of what we got. It would just be more built up and a lot smaller pieces.
Well, fair enough. I is a large set when you see it displayed. It doesn't feel like it's a small set. So yeah, to your point, right? Probably a little bit more detail. I'd probably push that to more of like a $200 range, kind of like how the Shire and the original Hobbit Hole.
Shire was almost 300. It's closer to 300 than 200.
Fair enough. But
no. Yeah. I feel you. So just get ready for the $700 weather.
Maybe like a siege tower included with it, right? Something that clearly should have been its own set.
West, they did not have siege towers at the Battle of Helm's Deep. Those are at Minas Tirith.
All right, siege ladders, Grinch, better.
They had that in the Uruk-hai army, the battle pack. Because if you got both of them, it was, essentially it was $30 plus it was $160 for the two.
Yeah.
And so the Helm's Deep set came with the exploding wall piece, but if you wanted to extend it by
Mm-hmm.
another section of the same size, you'd get the Uruk-hai army. And that's one I regret not picking up more of
Yeah, because you could
because
create
it was,
more.
oh, dude, a great, I mean, it was a whole wall section. It also came with a giant crossbow siege weapon, scorpion type thing that they used to shoot up the ropes to pull up the ladders on
Mm-hmm.
the bigger section of the wall. But it also came with Aemir, a Rohan soldier, and 4 Uruk-hai.
Yeah, I mean, it really is a battle pack.
It really is for $30. Like that seems like a great deal. You know, some Star Wars battle packs are now that for 4 minifigures or like 6 battle droids, which are like, can we stop counting those as minifigures? But let's dive in. Let's talk about the minifigures
Okay,
specifically here,
good.
because I'm looking at Aemir
Yeah.
and just, I mean, you know, they had this special spear mold for the Rohan soldiers, which I've not really seen again outside of maybe collectible minifigures.
Mm-hmm.
The Uruk-hai sword
Mm-hmm.
we've seen recolored, reused multiple times from sled, um, sled tracking to Anakin's pod racer engine greebling, right? Like there's been a
Yeah.
lot of uses for that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I'm looking at Amy here, and I'm just looking at the details on this minifigure. And when you look at it, you're like, this minifigure was not from 2012.
That's what I'm saying. I think, we saw so much details included in these minifigures and so many exclusive pieces that were introduced in this series just to complement them, right? And so, like you mentioned, let's start with the orcs real quick. We got a brand new mold for the sword, which was that Uruk-hai sword that kind of had the T kind of edge to it. We
Mm-hmm.
had those shields that had kind of the spikes coming out of the bottom, and a helmet that was unique to these characters, all created for just this series, and you know potentially even this set, and then some of the other ones with the Uruk-hai in them, right? You saw things like the old Lego axe being reused, which I think is kind of a fun sort of throwback and inclusion for the series. But then let's get into the Knights of Rohan and the Rohirrim soldiers, and we had these really detailed helmets that were included with printing on them to, as Sobek Bricks commented the other day on our episode, included the horse minifigurine kind of
Yep.
in the top of the helmet, right? Which is a throwback to the movie with some very intricate gold printing. We saw unique shields for all the characters, a unique weapon series with the swords and the spears, and then just some amazing printing on the torsos, including a lot of metallic printing as well, which wasn't necessarily like new at the time, but again, just the level of detail that all these figures had. You look at those and you're like, these were not created over a decade ago. These have to be new, like super exclusive minifigures. But every single like minifigure in this series had something special about it, which was just so cool. We did get some unprinted legs. Even this series isn't immune to that, but
But not a ton.
not a ton.
Not a ton.
Exactly. In an
And when we
era
did, it
where
was typically like the hobbits, which with the short
Mhm.
legs, which they really haven't really ever printed on short legs.
Yeah. And this is in an era where we can get some definitive Marvel sets these days with unprinted legs in them,
Mm-hmm.
right? Some $200 Marvel sets with unprinted legs. And then this $30 battle pack, we're getting some of the most detailed Lego minifigures they've ever produced. Like it just still blows my mind.
I will challenge the listeners to find a chest piece of armor that has more detailed printing than King Theoden's.
Oh yeah, I'm sure that's insane.
It is just, and then his torso is also incredibly detailed. You don't even see the dang thing. Or Haldir's. Look at his breastplate that just kind of comes down to like, and then you see that there's a tunic under it, but then on the breastplate they actually metallically printed this kind of swivel design it, and then gave it a suggestion of kind of this like other fur piece like coming through. Like what?
So,
Just phenomenal.
Grinch, if I may,
You
I
may.
want to talk about more holistically about this series. So, is there anything more kind of detail oriented you want to speak to?
I just as far as minifigures go,
Yeah,
I wanted to mention one last thing.
yeah, go for it.
And the most expensive minifigure in this series is our dear friend Grima Wormtongue,
It's
which
always
is
the
always
random ones, right? Like
so random.
the Padme from the Gungan sub, right? It's like the Grima worm tongue
Well,
for
that
one
one's a
thing.
cool one though, because that one's unique. But yeah, $185.
I mean, they're all unique, right? Like,
That's true. And then I believe it used to be the Mouth of Sauron, but I know that's his value's not gone down; it just hasn't gone up.
mm-hmm.
And then in a close-ish second is always Aragorn in his Gondor uh, armor piece. He comes in around 100. And yeah, the Mouth of Sauron's actually gone down a little bit, 60, 67. So, but super expensive minifigures here too.
Yeah,
Really hard to just even get the minifigures for these sets.
yeah. Just again, one of the standout features of this series, the minifigures, and then I would say definitely the builds after that. So, and some really great castle
you were
builds
maying.
when we weren't getting them, right? So,
Yeah,
I did
totally.
want to comment, when we first got the Harry Potter series, you and I took those sets, and we're like, we could do Lord of the Rings with this. This was post the movies coming out, but well before the Lego sets had come out. And we did this with Playmobil too, where we would take Playmobil nights and stuff and try to like
we would take off their hair because the ones without hair were orcs because we wanted to make them ugly.
Yes.
Bet you forgot about that.
But anyways, what I'm getting at is like this was definitely something in like the early to mid 2000s that we were like really jonesing for was Lego Lord of the Rings, and it just felt like it was right there. We finally get it in 2012, right, with the release of the Hobbit trilogy, and
the best thing the Hobbit trilogy ever did to this world was get us Lord of the Rings Lego.
When I wanted to speak to that, right, which is I think a lot of listeners would question like, hey, why did it take so long for us to get Lord of the Rings Legos, right? Second, we got them and then they just went away. What happened? And then I think it's an interesting question of why did we get them back now when we did, right? And I think all of it can sort of be traced lineage wise to the release of things like The Hobbit, right? Which kind of concluded. And I don't think this is going to be ruffling any feathers, right? Critically, I don't think was as acclaimed as the Lord of the Rings trilogy. I'm trying to kind of be very
I will say right? I actually enjoy the Hobbit movies. I know they're bad. They are bad. Don't even try to defend that or come at me. But I enjoy them.
I think they're fine,
and that's okay.
I think they're fine, right? But
I have fun when I watch them.
I think personally, they just make me want to watch the regular Lord of the Rings,
sure,
which I go and do.
Do I pretend it doesn't happen in the universe of or Middle Earth? Absolutely.
And I think there's a interesting issue with that though, right? Which is like after that, they put a lot of money into them. They just didn't see the return they were expecting. And I think that probably contributed to what we saw was like a hibernation period for Lord of the Rings. Then in the late 20 teens, Amazon gets the rights to the Silmarillion series, and we get the release of the Ring of Power kind of series. And I think that coincided, if I remember correctly, that was the summer of 2022. That coincided with the release of, or kind of precipitated the release of the Rivendell set. And I think
came out that spring,
that fall, right? The Rings of Power.
The Rings of Power came out in the fall, and then Rivendell came out in the spring.
Yes. And so obviously Rivendell had already been worked on at that point at the Lego group, right? Because it takes years for these sets to get designed from start to finish. But the fact that they came out so close to each other, I think, isn't, there's definitely some correlation there.
Oh,
Of
Lego has gone on record saying, we at times have tried to come out with stuff when movies weren't coming out and they just didn't sell. They were like, it needs to be in, mainstream culture's minds in order for, and maybe this has changed, but at the time, they weren't big enough to
sort
really
of drive the
push,
cultural narrative.
drive a cultural narrative of like, hey, if we came out with Lord of the Rings sets, and while some people might be scoffing at that and rolling their eyes, it was very true back then.
Yeah.
Lego would try to come out with something and it just wouldn't sell, and it's even Harry Potter. They brought that back because Fantastic Beast was not very good, but
It reintroduced us to kind of modern Lego
Harry Potter.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
So no, that's a great point. And in this case, right, like in terms of Lego, we have evergreen themes, right? Some of them are original Lego themes. Some of them are IP based. Things like Star Wars, right? Is going to be an evergreen theme for Lego. They might slow down some of the sets or the nowadays with all of the different Star Wars properties that they have to release and pull from, right? We might not get waves of stuff like we've gotten in the past, focusing on one set of movies or trilogy of movies or whatever. But it's a fair bet every year we're going to get a new Star Wars set, wave of Star Wars sets that are pushing the envelope. And now that there's enough Star Wars content out there, Lego can kind of space things out, right? It can kind of do that with Harry Potter, where it revisits every year of the students' lives, and we've seen that kind of happen with like 3 or 4 modern takes on the castle, and I think we're on our 3rd or 4th modern take of the Harry Potter castle.
Mm-hmm.
With Lord of the Rings, they just haven't had that opportunity to do that, and we've seen that this theme is not what we would maybe call an evergreen theme traditionally, except for, I think, modern Lord of the Rings, which is starting to prove, and I think that's what Rivendell really did for Lego, was proved when the Rings of Power didn't maybe succeed as well as they hoped it did, especially season 2, right? The Lego Lord of the Rings, I think, has far exceeded expectations.
Mm-hmm.
And I think has proven to Lego how much of a hunger there is for this series, which is why I think Lego has kept the scope relatively narrow going forward. But clearly we're seeing them start to just ever so slightly open up that aperture a little bit more, as they've done things like the Book Nook series, for example, with the Balrog, that just, we just got images for the other day. So very exciting.
And I think too, you've got, the Hunt for Golem property coming out here, I think in 2026.
Yeah. And we just got the
War of Rohirrim.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. That was fantastic. By the way, that was so good. That's the treatment I think The Hobbit should have had in my book. If you didn't want to go
back to the original 90s or 80s Hobbit.
Well, that animation style was a little goofy. But I really liked the way that the War of Rohirrim portrayed everything. And I think what set the films apart, not to dive too much into the film piece of it all, right, was the filming on set, on location, using the backdrop of New Zealand as much as they did. In The Hobbit, so much of it ended up being CGI. It just kind of took away from the majesty of the entire situation, right? You could tell that they relied more on CGI in that series than in the original one, which isn't to say that there wasn't CGI in the original one. And if you can go back to some of the original cuts of the film, it's looking its age, right? But it still held up really, really well compared to something like The Hobbit, which just feels and looks more fake or fantastical than the Lord of the Rings. The Lord of the Rings feels gritty. You feel the heat of Mount Doom. You can feel the dirt, and grime on everything, the sweat, the blood. The Hobbit just kind of feels, I don't know, like a cozy story, which maybe is sort of the intent, but I don't think it played out the way that they wanted it to.
So I'm gonna nerd out here for a second. In The Hobbit, they actually used these cameras called the Red Epic cameras because it was filmed for digital and for 3D, and they actually filmed it at a different FPS
Yeah,
than you
yeah.
would with traditional film, and that's what caused that kind of weird fake kind of what you would call is like the Hobbit glow that occurred,
Mm-hmm.
and so that was actually a filming issue, and then on top of it there was a bunch of CGI which made the CGI look like super weird.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like it makes the CGI look worse and more fake when you have a way higher frame rate like that.
Yeah. It just
So
there was other elements too. Do you remember the scene when they're in the river and this was a Lego set, right? When they're
mhm.
escaping and it went to like first person view for like 2
We don't need
minutes.
to talk. We don't need to talk about that
It
scene,
literally looked like they just gave an actor probably a stunt double like a GoPro and they just sent him
dude.
down like some
Are
web.
you like my YouTube algorithm? Because literally somebody like made like a YouTube video essay about that, and it was suggested to me like a day ago. That was like why we don't talk about this scene from The Hobbit, and it was like the barrel scene.
I remember being in the movie theater going like, what's going on? Oh dear.
So let's bring it back to Lego because
Yes.
that's why we're here. So let's talk about the modern sets before we kind of wrap up. I think the general consensus
Chef's kiss.
from worst to best is
No
going to be
notes.
Book Nook, Shire, Barad-dûr, Rivendell. I think for a lot of people that Rivendell is, you know, the greatest set, if not of all time. And it's hard to disagree. I actually really like Barad-dûr. Some days I like it more than Rivendell. I do. Um, I like that it introduced new minifigures.
Yeah.
You know, when I had the old YouTube channel, I made a top five missing Lego dinosaurs. We've gotten all of them except for, well, I guess we got all of them now, didn't we? I
Yeah.
guess except for a new Mosasaurus mold. But I also did the same thing for minifigures for Lord of the Rings, and my number one was Sauron. And so I really like how Barad-dûr introduced new minifigures. You know, we got him, and I always forget his name. I just call him Professor Piggy, but the Orc General from The Return of the King, of course. God, it's like Garth Mog or something like that. Um, you know, we got new additions right to the crew. We had a couple new ones in Rivendell as well, but like those were really standouts for me. So some
Mm-hmm.
days I do actually like Barad-dûr better, but I think overall Rivendell is still king.
I think it's just a fantastic set, and the way it uses color, the way it depicts the scenery, it's still done in a play scale, right? Like the scale of Rivendell would be really hard to capture, although builders have done it before in mocks. It just it introduced, I think it just really leveled up Lego into like the Icons team kind of like showed up and they're like, yo, we're here and we're here to play. And
Mm-hmm.
we're taking no prisoners.
Hold my beer.
Right. And the trees in it look fantastic. The way, again, new weapon molds, right? We had Shards
Mm-hmm.
of Narsil was like literally a new weapons mold introduced in that series. It's just crazy to see what those guys have been able to do. And to do it with such reverence for the source material too, both from the movies and books, I think is just really special. You can tell that Lego Lord of the Rings is a passion project for the designers at the Lego group. And I just think it comes out so much in the builds that they produce that it's just it's so apparent. You know what I mean? It just so evident that that's the case.
I think some of that speaks to how Lord of the Rings has like a media has not been dragged through the mud like some other franchises has. It
I mean, it
unfortunately
was.
feels like it's getting there. I mean, yeah, they did The Hobbit, but they didn't really touch it. You know, now we have that terrible Gollum game that like shut down an entire game studio because it was so bad. We've got we've got you know Hunt for Golem coming out. We got Rohirrim that just came out. Rings of Power is doing whatever the heck Rings of Power is doing. So it is definitely starting to get that treatment.
I would say it's certainly not immune to the challenges of modern canon, right?
Right.
Of it definitely shows that like creators need to be given the creative license to take a story and run with it, right? We know from testimony that The Hobbit was originally given to Guillermo del Toro. He left because of creative differences, and Peter Jackson was brought back. And as I recall, they set a deadline and said it needs to be done by this time. And, you know, creatives, especially someone as good as Peter Jackson, he doesn't do well under pressure like that. And he needs to be given time to just to show up and make some, you know, fantastic movies. We've seen the same thing kind of dog Star Wars for a long time. Even Marvel, which seemed like it was untouchable getting into the phase 4 and even the start of phase 5 in the MCU, it really felt like, wow, can we, you know, this is a juggernaut. And then it just collapsed on itself with some of those Disney Plus series and movies that just ultimately bogged down and way too much kind of side lore and world building that just still feels like it's continuing to today, right? And it's just like, to your point, I don't think it's immune, but I think it has stood more it's weathered more, or it's still standing, whereas other series I think have really struggled with this. I would also say, though, that it's probably because we haven't seen so many different versions of this, right?
Right.
And it's such a narrow scope that you're kind of limited into what damage you can do. You can redo The Hobbit, you can redo the trilogy, right? I don't think the trilogy is going to
get more to Middle Earth than that. But
yes,
let's focus back on the modern Lego sets, shall we?
Let's do that. So they're wonderful Lego sets, Grinch. I mean, any thoughts on what could come next?
Minas Tirith.
Yeah.
Period. They have to.
So
I do remember, I think it was the designer video where they're like, yeah, we made like 3 distinct sets. So I think they're done with this modern rendition. And so it will be, I wouldn't be surprised if we skip a year. Because that made me be like, okay, they had the 3 sets that they came out with. And I was a little confused by it because they were like, we wanted 3 sets, 1 for each movie. And I was like, okay, but you got the Shire, got Barad-dûr, which I guess is Return of the King based off of the minifigure selection. And then you've got Rivendell, which is also the Fellowship of the Ring, and so is the Shire. So where's the 2 towers represented?
Yeah.
So
one, we clearly know based off of the Shire that they aren't shying away from redoing something they've already done, right? So we could see very easily maybe
$7,000 Helm's Deep.
What I would say, so the question back to the Minas Tirith comment is it going to be a mini scale city, or is it more of a vignette from the city? Kind of
there's been a couple. There's been like an
Rivendell.
architecture one that they've done, which is chef's kiss. That would be interesting, but they haven't really done any like licensed architecture style sets yet outside of Harry Potter. So it's certainly doable.
Yeah.
Just something I want to put all my eggs in. I would like to see some sort of elephant build, right? Because you've got the what are they called? The Westerlies. I forget their name. The Wicked Men. The Haldir. Is it the Haldir? Something like that.
I believe so.
You've got that sort of troop and faction that needs representation. You certainly need some sort of Gondorian representation. I mean, if I could have my cake and eat it too, I'd want, a white tree build with some fountain guards and maybe a little vignette there. I'd want
Mhm.
Pelennor Field. I'd want the gate. You want a couple smaller sets and maybe a little, Osculius set that you could have. You could have like kind of like 4 distinct sets. Um,
I think
but I
this
think
is
I'd
a
like to see one in the style of the like architecture
yeah.
Hogwarts castle that they did, because you're not going to do it justice any
Yeah.
other way, I don't think.
This is a very clear area where I think Lego could actually transition Lord of the Rings into an evergreen theme if they so wished. And I think they're sitting on untapped potential here, to be frank.
Mm-hmm.
I think they could, to the exact point you mentioned, right? That's 4 great examples of Return of the King sets. They could go back and they could redo Weathertop. They could give us a Gandalf in the cart set again, right? Outside of the Shire build. That was
Are
one
the
of my
gates of
criticisms,
Argonath,
right? Yeah, that
Amon's
would be really
Hen?
cool. That the Fall of Boromir set would be an interesting one to include as well, right? Probably don't call it that, but
No, no, no. You call it this. You call it, third one to the chest for Boromir.
but I think there's so much potential there,
Call
right?
it T-Rex Breakout.
Luke's land speeder. um, the Return of the King is kind of a tougher series to produce, but because so much of those set pieces were so vast and expansive. But I think you could do like a King Theoden's Hall, right, where you could have like an old Theoden on a chair. That we know Lego loves to do like the spinny figure thing trick, right?
Oh,
So
yeah.
you could have him like spin with like young Theoden. That would be kind of fun. You
Just
could
an
do
Edoras
right,
set would
right.
be
I mean, I don't think you'd get
awesome.
the full building, right? But you could do like the hall or something in
Yeah.
kind of like a great little play set. You could do some ramparts from Helm's Deep. You could do a good Treebeard set again, like a proper Treebeard. I think would be really fun. I think you could do a second breakfast polybag. I think that would be kind of fun. You could do, the canoes going down the river, right out of, kind of backtracking to the Fellowship of the Ring. You could do a canoes series down the river. Going into Return of the King, right? Specifically Minas Tirith, you could do the fountain with the tree, and you could do like the Witch King, and like Gandalf on the horse. I know that's not the correct set piece, but it was kind of getting close to that point. Although, isn't there a
Mm-hmm.
point where he sees him up there at that? I'm thinking to the extended edition of the Return of the King. Anyways, you could do that. You could do the
Could do a
Pelennor
buildable Balrog.
yeah, you could do a Pelennor Fields with the Witch King and Faramir, right? You could do Osgiliath with Faramir and some ruins and like some orcs kind of crossing the river, right? All of these could be done in
What
a
about the
play
Watcher in
scale.
the water, the little squid guy,
Yeah, absolutely,
right outside
right?
of you could do like the door of Moria, just
Hmm.
a little wall, and then have the Watcher of the water there.
Yeah, so many really fun ways. This is one I don't think we'd ever get, but like a Grey Havens would be such a great set with like that
Mm-hmm.
elven boat. I think that would just be like I mean, it's such a great scene in the movie. Like it makes me tear up every single time. But
Dude,
it's
I like the first time I like cried as an adult man at a movie was, and I'd seen that movie. I mean, like I watched the movie every year, and then like I think I turned 18. I was just like, I was going off to college, and I'm like, the boys are going off to the,
into the
the
West.
going off to the West. I mean, God, why do I feel this way? If you could redo any set that they've already made from their original wave, what
Mm,
would you want?
this is a very niche set. I'd love to see a redone Weathertop
Hmm. Okay.
because it's small. I really would like some small Lord of
You'd
the
really
Rings
like the
sets.
$350 Weathertop?
I'd like a $50 or $60 Weathertop with
Nope.
the detail in it that I know Lego is capable of now. But still focusing on
Yeah, but imagine one $500.
why spend $50 on Lego when we could give you a $200 Weathertop?
It'd be even cooler, a $300 Weathertop. I would
Anyways,
like to see them redo the Black Gate
yeah,
because I feel like that for me was, the Rivendell, the little what was it called, the Elrond meeting, I think is what they called the actual set, um, the Council of Elrond. The that was excusable because it's just kind of classic Lego. Like, here's a playset.
Mhm.
Here's a little suggestion of it. Here you go. I still think we should do that challenge, by the way. But the Black Gate was a lot more detailed, but still not very accurate.
Yeah.
The gate kind of opened up this way, which is, and
Well, it was only
you
one
could,
half of the gate, right? So
right, you
that
could
was,
get two of them and do that. But I would get like a $300 Black Gate because I feel like there's a lot you could do with
yeah.
that.
Yeah, I think that would be great.
And I think that would look really cool on display.
Going back to the question I asked you about what could be next, if they were to do a fourth one in the Icons line right now, I think Helm's Deep would be the next piece to touch on.
Okay.
Because I think that's one, to your point, right? They have not done a 2-tower set yet.
Dude, Minas Morgul, you could make like, just like they did Barad-dûr, you can make like the bottom of it kind of like the mint color and then like gray and then black. Like, ugh.
Yeah.
Sorry, I interrupted you.
No.
Lord of the Rings just gets me excited.
Yeah. It's a really great series. I do think there's a lot of trapped potential here for Lego to lean into. I guess not trapped potential, right? This is just potential. There's a lot of potential here for Lego to turn this into an evergreen theme if they wanted to. Think if they just had a, early spring, a March, summer, and fall, 1 or 2 sets each season, right? Like,
dude, I'd be happy with one. Just like,
yes.
This is your Lord of the Rings set. I don't, make it $400, $500. That's fine, but just do one.
It's just,
I know that sucks, but like,
it's a lot of money.
I'm trying to sell this idea to Lego.
It's the one thing truly keeping me from really collecting these modern sets is those price points.
It's dropping $1,500 on them.
Which, and we've talked about this, right? But like when you compare that to what you can buy in Lego, it's like, well, I could do that, or I could get like a lot more. So I don't know. It's like I said, I still think I'm going to pick up the Shire. I think that's a really fun one. I really like it. I know you're critical of it. I enjoy it. But
that's all that matters.
Yeah. So that's where I land on that.
Well, I think I could probably talk for another hour. I think you could too. So let's save the listeners. Wes delving into movie theory over here and talking about Tolkien's life. I mean, he is a hero after all. He was in World War One. Anyways, let's go and move over to our brick mail.
Let's do it.
Brick mail. All right, West. Do you want to take away the first brick mail?
Yes, and our first brick mail is from Rob Walker, who writes, "Hey guys, I just finished watching episode 2, which was nothing more than a mishmash of gimmicks and twists. I'm so disappointed in this season." He's referencing the latest season of Lego Masters US. He says, "Unnecessary. A 4-hour build time. This is appropriate for a much later episode in the season. Team pair-ups. The people just started the season. They hardly know each other. Tallest build is safe. Encourage teams to just build something tall, like the radio tower thing that won the height contest. The wedding planner animation. Unnecessary. Closing the brick pit with no warning. A dance contest conga line with Will. The contestants did not have time for this."
What do you mean? They had 4 hours to build.
They had plenty of time. Lego Masters needs a lot more focus on builders and on the builds. I'll stop my whining for now. Well, Rob,
I'm telling you, you got to watch Lego Masters Australia.
I think you're in good company. I still haven't watched episode 2.
Oh, dude, I gave you this one because I also didn't watch it.
But I'll just say, I am not surprised based off of kind of the way this season started, and I think they're going to find themselves kind of bit in the butt with the way this is going. So, yeah.
Our next bit of brick mail is from Deborah. She says, "Hi, West and Grinch. I just wanted to send a word of thanks for your podcast. At age 62 and semi-retired, I'm an AFOL newbie. Until a few months ago, I never laid hands on Lego bricks, not even as a kid. And my generation girls did not play with Lego.
Welcome to the
I
hobby,
got
Deborah.
started I got started with Lego when by chance I saw the botanical succulent set on an aisle end cap while shopping at Walmart. I had no idea that Lego could be for adults. I've been nonstop purchasing and building since then. I'm learning so much from your podcast. I'm working my way through the older episodes too. You two are a pleasure to listen to. So thoughtful, intelligent, well organized, and balanced in your presentation. I appreciate your willingness to share your time and knowledge. Warm regards, Deb.
Well, thank you,
And
Deb.
that's awesome. We get a little bit of information from like Spotify and iTunes on who listens to us, and it's really nice to see that we've got a wide range of experienced builders and new builders, and people that are a little more experienced in life, and people that are less experienced, and it's just great to kind of see we've got a little bit of everybody here from the spectrum, and certainly wonderful to have a a woman in the Lego community too, building, creating, because it is certainly a hobby for everybody. And glad that you at least you got to enjoy it eventually, even though when you grew up, it was not a cultural norm for girls to play with Legos.
Tim writes in and says, good episode. I'll say it's true about the box art. I was never into Lego, and one day shopping at Target with my 4-year-old son, I was drawn to the Dark Trooper helmet because I thought the picture looked cool. This was 3 years ago, and now my 7-year-old and I have a Lego room filled with sets. My wife let me have the boiler room to be a Lego room, but it's better than none. But the box art really drew me in, and I am happy for it. And Tim is responding to our episode last week about Lego box art, where we said, the kind of purpose, or one of the chief purposes of that, is still to act as sort of a billboard or advertisement for the set itself. And Tim, that's some great anecdotal kind of experience there, that it was in fact you just seeing that set on the shelf that drew you in. So, and clearly something about that Dark Trooper helmet, drew your eyes to that image and sparked your own imagination and your own Lego journey. So clearly there's still some value in that.
Again, welcome Tim too. I mean, sounds like you found Lego a little bit later in life as well. So I think I love kind of hearing everybody's stories on how they found Lego, because for everybody who's got a story like West or I, there's also ones that are very different. So it's just kind of cool to kind of hear that. I feel like that's my favorite question to like ask somebody who I know is into the hobby. Is like, well, how did you get into it? Because it can be, I saw the succulents on an end cap in Walmart, or it can be like, I don't know, I got this as a white elephant gift, and I was like, this is amazing. John FC writes, good episode. Again, responding to box art. Honestly, I only really look at the box art when I'm looking for set in store. I think it's mostly for marketing, as you guys said. Also liked you talking about Lego instructions. Maybe that could be its own episode. Maybe.
We've taken some suggestions in the past, Grinch.
We've certainly done an episode from less. I just don't know how much there is to talk about instructions, but maybe, hold my beer, John. We'll add it to the list. Was sad to see that Grinch did not like The Last of Us TV show. I really liked it, though the game is definitely better. Would definitely listen to you guys talk about The Last of Us.
Welcome to our new podcast. It's called
Adult Fans of Last of Us.
AFOL.
Yeah. See what I did there? So I think maybe we need to do like a special or something. I don't know. One of these days.
An Adult Fans of Last of Us special.
No, that sounds like fanfic, and I don't know if we want to go down that route. John, I'll just say, The Last of Us is a good TV show. The Last of Us video game, specifically the second, is one of, if not my favorite video game of all time. Whereas The Last of Us show is just a show. So I don't not like it. I just the game is on this untouchable level for me, and the show just doesn't get there. It just doesn't.
The game, like most video games, is extremely compelling when you are the one who is forced to take the action. And I think that can be done in a way that is almost insensitive in some video games. A good example of this was Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2. The opening of that, I think, was rough.
He's talking about No Russian.
Yes. And it was, and even, became something where you could skip, right? And I think they just realized like that was maybe a little too far.
Oh, you can skip The Last of Us Part 2 because a lot of it is also too far.
Just don't play the game.
They don't even. No, there's actually like you can skip all so you could just do the gameplay.
Yeah,
because
what
it is rough, but they overcorrected in the show, in my opinion.
What I think is really fascinating about the game, and I played the first one, I didn't play the second one, but I think that it translates, right, is like when you're the one who's taking the actions, opening, the opening of The Last of Us with Sarah, Joel's daughter, and you're the one who's, moving Joel, you're Joel playing as Joel, right? And your daughter's in your arms. Like it's so visceral, and it just puts you right there in the middle of the action. And the sadness and everything else that occurs, it really kind of allows you to connect with it in a very emotional way that I think the TV show, because you're still just separated from it, it's just hard to translate it. You know what I mean, Grinch? And so I think especially with the second game, the struggle there is how do you connect the audience member to the feelings of Ellie, to the feelings of the characters without.
I would push back slightly. I mean, I think both mediums have their own pros and cons.
Absolutely.
And I'd say the issue I have with this, because I don't even have an issue with the first season, because like Ellie's kind of more jovial, naive, like she's supposed to be that way. The issue I have with the second season is like they're in Seattle, and then she's like
kind of joking
happy,
around,
jovial, joking around, and then it's like, oh yeah, I'm big mad. We got to go find Abby, and it like just she'll walk through a door and just be like, oh yeah, big mad time. But like you were just cuddling and flirting. So like, are you? Because like, but in the game, the acting of the game almost seems better. It's the game does a really good job of showing and not telling, and the show does a really bad job of telling and telling. Like, spoiler alerts for The Last of Us. If you have not seen it, you have 5 seconds. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I will only talk about what's been shown in the show. In the game, you don't find out that Abby killed who Abby's dad was until Nora tells Ellie. In the show, that's the third time the show tells you. So by the time you get to the Nora scene, you've heard it 3 times, and you're just like, can we just get this over with, please, so we can go back to the theater and move on? Like, it's just not. Ellie makes a decision in the game to do what she does to Nora after hearing that. In the show, she's like, yeah, you're damn right he did that. And then because we've already told you 3 times, and then it just turns to black pretty much, So there's just some weird decisions like that where I just they took some of the good stuff about the game and they cut it and changed it to something bad that just doesn't work.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think the Spores is a really good example of where they didn't want to do Spores in the first one because it was hard to film with gas mask. And they're like, well, in the second one, though, the scene doesn't work without him. So we're just going to introduce him for this, and we're probably never going to talk about him again. Which is kind of like, okay, you guys could have just introduced the idea of Spores, and then you've also only ever talked about the tendrils twice. Like,
Pedro Pascal is famous for doing a show where his face isn't being shown. So
right,
I feel like wearing a gas mask actually probably would have only, And
it's not like the whole thing was in a gas. Like, you could have just done like 2 gas mask scenes, and then just been like, can't go that way. There's spores. or like, oh, hey, gas mask gone, and then they kind of get through it, and you're like, okay, we could, that's a topic for our other podcast, AFOLs Welcome, adult fans of Last of Us. Welcome.
Maybe we still need to do that as a 30-minute just like joke episode.
Maybe we should.
Maybe we should. All right.
John, rally the troops, and we'll do it for you, buddy.
Our last comment today comes from Sabaman70 on YouTube, who asked the question, why are piece counts only displayed in boxes in the United States? And Sabaman70, what a wonderful question. And I have an answer for you. And we're going to dive into that. I, like all modern people, took your question, put it onto Google, and hit enter. And Google actually did a wonderful job of breaking this down in AI, which I was really surprised about. But I'm, a modern...
I'm not AI, you rock. If you're listening, Grinch has been a big fan of yours ever since you took over.
I like using AI when I can, but I also am diligent and I want to do my homework. And so I'll read to you what AI spit out, and then I'll read to you what I found, just to kind of connect the dots a little bit to the official requirement.
AI said 1000000011001110.
Nice. Which actually, what a fantastic tool. The Google AI put together this little blurb here and connected it to different links to people posting and sharing stuff. So they said, in the United States, Lego boxes display the number of pieces included because it's a legal requirement under the U.S. Federal Trade Commission. This requirement mandates that packaged products sold in the U.S. must state the net quantity of contents. Lego includes the piece count on North American boxes because of this. According to Lego, here's a more detailed explanation. The U.S. law, the U.S. Federal Trade Commission, requires packaged products to clearly state the net quantity of contents, weights, volume, or numerical count on the label. Lego's compliance. Lego complies with this law by including the piece count on boxes sold in the United States. In Canada and other regions, while they also have a similar law, other regions like Europe do not have the same requirement for including piece count on packaging. Lego's perspective. Lego may have other reasons for not including the piece count in other regions, such as desire to focus on building experience, minifigure collection, or to avoid potential comparison based on part counts. And this is where AI, I think, was taking what people were writing and as speculation and kind of speculated itself. So what I do want to connect and what we know for sure is that Title 15, Chapter 39 of the U.S. Code 1453, requirements of labeling, placement, form, and contents of statement of quantity, supplemental statement of quantity in the U.S. Federal Code, states that contents of label, no person subject to the prohibition contained in Section 1452 of this title shall distribute or cause to be distributed in commerce any packaged consumer commodity unless in conformity with regulations which shall be established by the promulgating authority pursuant to Section 1455 of this title, which shall provide that the commodity shall bear a label specifying the identity of the commodity and the name and place of business of the manufacturer, packer, or distributor. The net quantity of contents in terms of weight or mass, measure, or numerical count shall be separately and accurately stated in a uniform location upon the principal display panel of that label, using the most appropriate units of both the customary inch/pound system of measure as provided in paragraph 3 of this subsection, and except as provided in paragraph 3A II or paragraph 6 of this section, the SI metric system.
TLDR, the FTC said you have to put the piece count on the box.
Yes.
And if you did not fall asleep while listening to the show, now's your cue.
But, right, that is probably why we see it in Canada and Mexico as well, because it's just easier for Lego to ship those series of boxes to the North American market versus exclusively for the United States market, and why you don't see that necessarily anywhere else. So
we see that a lot too with products going to Canada from the U.S. If they're sold in Canada, they also have to have French. So you have to have both English and French descriptions. So very similar.
Yeah. So anyways, hope that helps and answers a very interesting and niche Lego question.
And that is a wrap of another episode of AFOLs Welcome. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe and leave us a review on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, or wherever you are listening to this show. If you would like to write the podcast, please email us at afolswelcome@gmail.com or follow us on Instagram at AFOLs Welcome. Thank you for listening, and we will catch you on the next one.